It's time to cover a 1-bar heavy deck build for the next class, Templar. This one parses 120k, so the same as the Sorcerer build, and slightly lower than the Necro and Warden builds. Once again, I have tested it on stream by joining random trials in the group finder, and you can find logs from these runs in the description and on the website guide. Though in some of those logs, I used a slightly different 2-bar version of the build, which allowed me to test more skills faster. For testing, I joined a Veteran Rogrove run, Veteran Hard Mode Maw Floor Cache, and Veteran Kind's Aegis run. The build is also on my website, so if you prefer written guides over YouTube videos, you can read it there instead. The link will be in the description. Starting off with subclassing, we're going to use Templar's Ajax Spear, Sorcerer's Stormcalling, and Nablet's Assassination. So this build can be used by characters with either Templar, Sorcerer, or Nablet as their base class. But if you're a Templar, you can utilize the Templar Class Mastery script on your Banner Bearer, which is very similar in strength to Cavalier's Charge in terms of weapon and spell damage, but grants you bonus armor on top of that. Moving on to skills. This is the base setup that will work for most situations and which should be your starting point when making situational setups. Ulfsted's Contingency, with the Shock, Lingering Torment and Force combination on it, is your source of the Empower buff, which increases damage done by heavy attacks by 70%. Since Ulfsted's Contingency is a Mage's Guild skill, it will trigger the Might of the Guild passive, which grants you Empower for 10 seconds. It also deals decent damage on AoE and grants you the Minor Force buff, increasing your critical damage by 10%. Ulfsted's Contingency is delayed until the next skill cast, but whenever it's needed, you can activate it early by bashing your enemy. If you cast this ability as you're finishing your heavy attack, the Empower you gain from it will start working just in time to boost the final tick of that heavy attack you just finished. Next we have Blazing Spear, a 10-second ground dot, which has to be slotted to trigger Ajax Spear skill and passives. Merciless Resolve is an ability that will cause your light and heavy attacks to generate stacks. You can spend 5 stacks to fire a powerful arrow that also heals you if you're in melee range. It also grants you Major Salve during Prophecy. Camouflage Hunter will grant you the Minor Berserk buff, which increases your damage done by 5% for 5 seconds after you deal critical damage from enemy's flank, which has a very wide radius. It will also trigger the Slayer passive, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 3%. Banner Bearer, with the Magic, Cavalier's Charge and Heroism combination on it, increases your magical damage by 6%, grants weapon damage based on your movement speed, and grants Minor Heroism, increasing your ultimate generation. You can use the Class Mastery instead of Cavalier's Charge, if your base class is Templar. Soul Harvest is a cheap ultimate that increases target's damage taken from you by 20%. Having it slotted will also cause you to regain 10 ultimate whenever you deal a final blow against an enemy. Concealed Weapon is an ability that will passively grant us 15% movement speed, which will grant us 90 weapon and spell damage, thanks to the Cavalier's Charge script on the Banner Bearer. So that was the base setup, but now I'm gonna show you a bunch of situational skills, which you can use to tailor this base setup to specific fights. Whenever you need to slot situational skills, replace Camouflage Hunter. Elemental Blockade is your source of balance, if supports aren't providing it. It requires enemies to be concussed, so you'll have to use Shock Enchant to proc it, or rely on your teammates for that. Hurricane is an ability that deals decent damage, increases your weapon and spell damage to the Expert Mage passive, and grants you Major Resolve, increasing your armor. Usually, Major Resolve should be provided by your tank, but if it isn't, you can use Hurricane instead, and it's only a slight DPS loss compared to Camouflage Hunter, because Hurricane itself deals really good damage. Critical Surge is a very strong heal. Use it when you need a self-heal, because you're assigned to some duty which puts you far away from your group, or if your healers are bad. It also increases your weapon and spell damage through the Expert Mage passive. Inner Light is an alternative for Camouflage Hunter, when Minor Berserk is provided by the healers. Instead of 3% weapon and spell damage in Minor Berserk, it provides 7% max Magicka, 5% from the ability itself, and 2% from the Magicka Controller passive. Radiant Ward is a defensive alternative to Blazing Spear. You will lose out on a strong dot, but you'll keep access to Ajax Spear skill and passives. Radiant Ward is a damage shield that also deals AoE damage around you when used. To give you some example, this is a setup you should use when your supports aren't providing the crucial off-balance debuff. Elemental Blockade replaces Camouflage Hunter, so that you can apply off-balance yourself. And this is an example of a setup you can use if you have trouble surviving. Radiant Ward replaces Blazing Spear, and Critical Surge replaces Camouflage Hunter. Now as for rotation. I don't use a static rotation, so this is just a list of priorities. Simply recast abilities when they run out, and follow the list of priorities when there are multiple things to refresh. If you're tracking the off-balance debuff, you should cancel your heavy attack when there's around 1 to 2 seconds left on the off-balance immunity. This way, the next heavy attack you start will finish its channel during off-balance, and you'll be able to fit 3 heavy attacks during a single off-balance window. Use Offset's Contingency if your Empower is out, or if it's going to run out by the end of the heavy attack you're channeling. Use Soul Harvest whenever it's ready, use Blazing Spear, use Merciless Resolve if we have at least 5 stacks, and use Offset's Contingency as a filler. Keep in mind that you can pre-buff Offset's Contingency before entering combat. Now as for passives. I am now very quickly going through all of the passives you should get on the screen. You can either pause the video or look up this list on the website guide. This is the base setup that will work for most situations and which should be your starting point when making situational setups. So Infallible Mage, Surgeon's Mail, Rakat's Voidmantle Mythic, and 1P Slamcrow. When choosing different situational sets, you can only replace Infallible Mage. Surgeon's Mail and Rakat's Voidmantle are too strong and too crucial for this build to ever be replaced. If you want to use a medium armor set, you have to make sure your group is providing enough penetration. Infallible Mage parses 115.6k DPS, which is only 4.7k lower than the top setup, which uses Slivers of Null-Arca. But Slivers of Null-Arca is focused on single target damage, and it's a medium set, so when using it, you have to make sure your supports are providing you with enough penetration. And because of that, Infallible Mage is the most practical set. Now, this is a list of situational gear. Sul'Zan's Torment is the best set for trash packs, and for bosses that regularly spawn smaller adds. Slivers of Null-Arca is the best set for single target damage. Now, this is a list of alternative gear, so gear that is easier to obtain and can be used while you work towards the best gear. As for crafted gear, we have Order's Wrath and Towerkill Strike. As for dungeon gear, we have Noble Duelist, and as for gear coming from PvP, we have Deadly Strike. You can use the Flame enchant instead of Shock if your supports are providing off balance. Now let me show you a bunch of examples of final setups you could end up with. This is a setup made with just crafted gear, which uses Order's Wrath, Towerkill Strike, and 2-piece Assassin's Guile for the crit chance bonus. It parses 80.2k DPS, although a huge majority of this DPS loss stems from lack of Surgeon's Mail. Next, this is a setup you should use if you don't have access to any trial gear. Noble Duelist replaces Infallible Mage. This setup parses 110.4k DPS. Next, this is a setup you should use if you don't have access to the Rakat's Voidmantle Mythic. Until Mirror's Construct replaces Rakat's Voidmantle and Slamcrow. This setup parses 104.5k DPS. And this is the best setup for single target damage. Slivers of Null-Arca replaces Infallible Mage. This setup parsed 120.3k DPS. Keep in mind, you have to make sure your supports are providing enough penetration if you want to use this setup, because Slivers of Null-Arca is a medium armor set. Moving on to champion points. In the blue tree, you want to use Weapons Expert, which increases light and heavy attack damage by 20%, Deadly Aim, which increases single target damage by 6%, Wrathful Strikes, which increases your weapon and spell damage by 205, and Master at Arms, which increases your direct damage by 6%. Replace Master at Arms with Fighting Finesse if you aren't at the critical damage cap. For example, because you're using light armor, or because your supports aren't providing enough buffs. In the red tree, you want to use Bond's Vitality, which increases your max health by 1400, Fortified, which increases your armor by 1731, Celerity, which increases your movement speed by 10%, and Rejuvenation, which increases all of your recoveries by 90. Moving on to race. The difference between best and worst race is about 5% of DPS, and there is no content in the entire game that you'll be blocked from completing because of choosing a bad race. With that said, the best races for 12-man content are High Elf and Dark Elf. The best race for 4-man content is Khajiit. Other decent options are Orc and Breton. Moving on to Mundus. Most of the time, you should use the Thief Mundus, which increases your critical chance. The Lover is an option if you're using medium armor, and your group isn't providing enough penetration. But a light armor set, combined with the Thief Mundus, is always going to be stronger. As for attributes, it's extremely simple. You should always put all 64 points into Magicka. Moving on to food. Most of the time, you should use the Arteon Pickled Fish Bowl, which increases your max health and max Magicka. Solitude Salmon Millet Soup is a cheaper alternative. For dummy parsing, you can use Tomato Garlic Chutney, which gives you only max Magicka. Moving on to potions. Use the Spell Power potions. They'll provide Major Sorcery and Major Prophecy, which are crucial buffs. You can craft them by combining Lady's Smoke, Namira's Rot, and Cornflower. Moving on to Parse. The highest Parse was achieved with the single target Null Arca setup, and it was 120.3k DPS. The regular setup, which uses Infallible Ether, parsed 115.6k DPS. The setup without any trial gear, so the Noble Duelist one, parsed 110.4k DPS. The crafted setup parsed 80.2k DPS. And the setup without Rakat's Void Mantle, which uses Antilmir's Construct instead, parsed 104.5k DPS. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below, or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.